Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. We're currently on day 26 of Ukraine's special military operation to liberate the people of Kursk. And when we go on the military map, officially there's been no changes the last 2 days, but just because the map isn't changing doesn't mean the fighting here isn't intense. This area of the map is unique because it's not heavily mined. Why would the Russians mine it? They never thought Ukraine would get this far. So it's very easy for both Ukrainian and Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups to go back and forth through wooded areas and open fields. So there's lots of skirmishes, lots of fighting occurring in this gray zone, but officially who controls what? Things aren't really changing officially. But the Ukrainians are focused on this village of Koronevo. The reason why is there's a bottleneck, a single road that goes northwest to Rilsk. So if the Ukrainians can take this village and cut off this road, Russia's not getting back into this region anytime soon. They've got the Sem River to the west and open fields and wooded areas to the east and the north. So Ukraine is trying to secure this village before they begin a sweeping operation to go south and west through the Glushkovo district. Like I've been saying for the last couple weeks, this district is cut off. It can't be resupplied. There's no rush to take it. Russia can't hold this region. So over the coming weeks, this will fill in, as I imagine Russian forces who can't get food, water, and ammunition will eventually try to figure out how to get back across the river. Now we know that the 3 bridges have been blown. It's not easy to get across this river. It's pretty wide and deep relative to this area of the map. And Russia 4 times has attempted to construct a pontoon bridge, but within 6 or 12 hours it will be spotted by a drone or a satellite, and Ukraine calls in a HIMARS or an artillery strike. Russia is just sending their engineering crews out there to die by continuously trying to set up a pontoon bridge. According to UK intelligence, Russia is creating volunteer units to counter Ukraine in the Kursk Oblast, while prioritizing the Pokrovsk axis. So I think what the Kremlin is doing here is they're saying, Russia's been attacked. Who wants to defend the motherland? Perhaps for the last 2.5 years, you've been unwilling to sign a contract and go to Ukraine, even though I call that Russian territory now. What about Kursk? So we'll see if these volunteer units being raised, basically like the equivalent of local militias, we'll see how they fare against Ukrainian forces if Russia tries to use them in combat. But more and more, the Russians are starting to sound defeatist, especially about Kursk. Here's a clip from a Russian war correspondent, Romanov, and he's saying exactly what I've been saying the last couple weeks. I made this conclusion, perhaps I'm mistaken, but still, until the end of the war, we won't push the enemy out of the Kursk Oblast. We simply won't. It will all stay till the end of the war. This battle in the Kursk Oblast, why? Because the enemy is dodging direct engagements. So it doesn't matter what reasons he gives. He reached the same conclusion as me, that Ukraine is going to hold on to this territory in Russia until the war is over. Now I'm sure he's going to say the war will end with Ukraine collapsing and their military pulling out of the occupied territories inside of Russia. But my conclusion is the opposite. Eventually there's going to be a political or an economic crisis in Russia, and Russia's military will just pull out of the occupied territories of Ukraine. And they're even saying this on Kremlin State TV. It's not just random bloggers on Telegram. The Kremlin is deliberately allowing people with contrarian opinions to cast doubt and criticism about how Putin's special military operation is going. Why? They're preparing their people for failure. They're preparing their people for achieving less than the full objectives of this special military operation. So here's Olga, the host of the show, listening to Vitaly Tretyakov saying Russians are asking questions about the Kursk region. Here's what this guy has to say. Since they're seeing glimpses of you on TV, they are asking questions. What kind of questions are they asking? He's talking about ordinary Russian citizens outside of the capital of Moscow. Not how many leopards we took down, 11, 12, or 23, these absurd numbers the Russian MOD says every day about Ukrainian losses. Not how many Abrams tanks were burned down. No one cares about that. What's happening at the front? People don't understand what is happening because of the chaos of information and statements of military experts. The question that is being asked the most, what is happening in the Kursk region? They are no longer even asking why it happened. Everyone understands why it happened. They just can't understand why we still don't know. Who specifically was or will be held accountable for this? Anyway, you either have to explain to people why their heroes were forced to fight for 2 weeks without assistance from their forces. They called them, got a hold of them, they said, "We can't withstand it, there aren't many of them." We have to answer people's questions and explain it. I'm talking to our media as a whole. We've known for a long time that everything is bad in Ukraine, but for some reason, Ukraine still has yet to collapse. We've also known that their front is about to fall, but for some reason, Ukraine's front has still yet to disintegrate. People are asking me this. That's some quality discussion and debate currently happening on Kremlin State TV. Where I think they're going with this is they're going to hold some general accountable, the general in charge of these conscripts in the Kursk region. He also lost the Kharkiv region 2 years ago. This is not a very good Russian general. So I think despite this guy being loyal to Putin, unquestionably, he might get arrested. And he might be publicly executed to satiate the anger that Z-patriots have currently in Russia. But for ordinary Russians, they know something is wrong. They know this 3-day special military operation is not going according to plan. Russia's Kursk authorities form armed volunteer groups for security in evacuating areas amid ongoing looting. So Russian forces continue to destroy and pillage their own towns and settlements, robbing stores for anything of value, electronics, and taking it off with them. So they're forming armed militias to stop looting from Russian soldiers. I don't think that's going to work. So let's talk about the area of the front that the Russians really do care about. They made a calculation. It's okay to lose territory inside of Russia as long as we can continue making progress in the Donbass region. And this salient is kind of absurd to look at, the way they just continuously brute force their way towards Pokrovsk, ignoring to the south, ignoring to the north. They think if they can destroy this town, the logistics of this region will collapse, and they'll be able to fill in more territory easier in the future. Situation in Donbass spiraling out of control, Azov brigade officer says. There have been lots of Ukrainians taking to social media complaining about the lack of manpower, the lack of resources, the incompetence of leadership in this region that allowed Russia to advance 20-ish kilometers over the last 6 months. Azov brigade officer Roman Ponomarenko warns that our front in Donbass has collapsed, while so-and-so says Pokrovsk has a few weeks left. I don't think that's true, but it's their right to raise the alarm and complain. And Zelensky has to respond. Zelensky faces backlash over Russia's breach of the eastern defense lines. It's concerning. So here's a thread from Tataragami. He's a former Ukrainian officer. And he says the situation in Pokrovsk is indeed severe, but far from hopeless. Ukrainian command has the resources needed for stabilization, though this will require difficult and potentially unpopular decisions. Resource shortages stem from both internal and external factors. Internally, issues include delayed mobilization, an ineffective recruitment process, awful commanding culture, and the government's struggle to balance public opinion with necessary measures. Externally, delays in Western aid, persistent restrictions on weapon use, insufficient military production ramp-up, and slow aid being delivered is the problem. The issues in Pokrovsk are not new. Delayed aid from the United States, hindered by isolationists from MAGA Republicans in Congress, made the fall of Avdiivka easier for the Russian forces. This is important to highlight. Avdiivka held for almost 2 years, until MAGA Republicans blocked a military aid vote in Congress for 8 months. That allowed the very robust defense lines to be broken. This is how the Russians allowed this advance. Ukraine is trying to stabilize the region, but difficult decisions are going to have to be made. So Ukraine, of course, is going to shift forces to defend Pokrovsk as Russian troops advance. The Karadog Brigade, consisting of around 2,000 soldiers, has been shifted from its southern position now to the eastern front. So if Ukraine wants to make progress in Kursk, if Ukraine wants to apply pressure maybe in Kherson, it comes at a cost to reallocate forces to the fronts the Russians want Ukraine to reallocate forces to. It's a trade-off. What are you willing to lose for what are you willing to gain? And these are impossible decisions, decisions I'm not making, and decisions I'm not going to criticize at this time. So Russia's pretty upset, and they continue their acts of terrorism. I don't want to talk about this, but I have to. The city of Kharkiv the last 2 days has been struck by Russian Iskander missiles and S-300 missiles. Russian attack on Kharkiv kills 7 people, injures another 90. This was from 2 days ago. This was an apartment building that was struck with a Russian missile. There's videos online of people trapped in their apartment buildings being cooked alive by the fire and the smoke. There's a picture of a 14-year-old girl who was sitting outside the building when the missile struck. She was killed instantly by a piece of debris. There's a video from Dmitry at War Translated. This is a Ukrainian journalist on the ground at the apartment building that was struck. I'll link this down below if you want to see it for yourself. I don't know if I can play it or not, given the restrictions on this platform, but I do want to make sure that the world doesn't forget about the acts of terrorism that Russia is committing every single day. There's no military targets anywhere near this apartment building. So that was Saturday. This was this morning. At least 41 injured, including 5 children, as Russia launches a ballistic missile at Kharkiv. Unconfirmed reports suggest it was an Iskander and S-300 missiles. This is the Kharkiv Palace of Sport. It was Kharkiv's largest indoor sports facility, used for sporting events, exhibitions, and performances. This is what the building looked like before, and this is what the building looks like now. Russia deliberately struck this building on a Sunday afternoon to maximize civilian casualties, maximize civilian terrorism. Of course, this building was not being used for military purposes, but this is what the Russians do. This is what they do every single day. Russia is once again terrorizing Kharkiv, striking civilian infrastructure and the city itself. As of now, there are over 30 wounded. This is the tweet and video from President Zelensky. I'll link it down below. So what's the response? Where is the political pressure now building? Zelensky urges the West to let Ukraine hit Russia with long-range weapons. This is what Ukraine has been begging for about 4 months, ever since restrictions were lifted up to 100 kilometers. The United States said it was okay for artillery and GMLRS, given Russia reinvaded Kharkiv in May. But the restriction was placed on ATACMS. And I do believe the United States has been vetoing other NATO partners wanting to allow, for example, the use of British Storm Shadow cruise missiles. So Ukraine has sent a delegation to Washington, D.C. to meet with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. I know people want to be critical of Biden, but let's be honest, Biden is leaving office in a couple months. He's kind of checking out. And it's going to be hard to reverse policy decisions prior to leaving office because I don't think Biden wants to make any decisions to cause a situation that would be more difficult for VP Harris if she's elected and takes office in January. The prevailing train of thoughts is, I'll just wait a couple months for my replacement to make these very difficult decisions. But you can see the problem. We don't have a couple months. We need decisions to be made now. Ukraine presents a specific target list requesting the United States lift the restrictions on the use of ATACMS inside of Russia. President Zelensky released an impassioned video. The video is over 4 minutes long. I'll link it down below, but here's the gist of what he says. There have been meetings at various levels, and one of our top priorities is securing long-range capabilities for our defense forces. This is crucial to preventing the terror that our Kharkiv and other cities across Ukraine are forced to endure. Clearing Ukrainian skies of Russian-guided bombs is a powerful step toward forcing Russia to seek an end to the war and a just peace. Our representatives have provided all the necessary information and details to our partners. I am calling on the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. We need the means to fully and effectively protect Ukraine and its people. Here's an observation from the channel Ukraine Battle Map. There's not been a single cited use of Ukraine using an ATACMS in almost a month. Ukraine invaded Russia 26 days ago. So this might not be a coincidence that Ukraine has not used or maybe received any ATACMS from the United States since Ukraine crossed the border into Russia without informing the United States they were going to do it. I definitely think there's a concern from people like the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan that if the United States continues delivering ATACMS, Ukraine can't resist using them on valid military targets inside of Russia without permission, without telling the United States first. This is not a confirmed story or report. I can't verify this, but if we want to speculate, it is possible the United States has stopped supplying ATACMS to Ukraine for fear they will use them deeper than 100 kilometers without permission. On top of that, throughout the entire month of August, the United States has only sent Ukraine 2 small military aid packages worth $125 million each. These aid packages consist of artillery ammunition, anti-tank missiles, Humvees, and Gimler's rounds for the HIMARS. But no big-ticket items. And I know why. I can tell you my theory why military aid from the United States is slowing down at the moment, and it's because our election is in 64 days. The United States has this $60 billion aid package to allocate over a year, but how you allocate that money depends if you think more money is coming in the future. Congress is going to have to vote again in either December, January, or February, and depending on how the election goes, this might be the end of military aid from the United States. So the Biden administration, the Department of Defense, is slowing down weapons deliveries for fear that this is the end. Because if Donald Trump is elected president, he will cut off all military aid to Ukraine. I know there are Trump supporters who watch my videos saying, no, but show me a tweet, show me a clip, show me a statement from Trump. Because he's deliberately ambiguous when he's not lying. And he surrounds himself with people who love Russia and hate Ukraine. Trump adds RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard to his presidential transition team. These are the most anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian people in the world. Scott Ritter is a good friend of RFK Jr. Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, all the people who hate Ukraine and support Russia are rallying behind Trump to force him into office in January. On top of that, if MAGA Republicans control the speakership under Speaker Johnson, even if Kamala Harris is elected president, Speaker Johnson could just block a vote again. And the thing that happened for 8 months earlier this year could just happen again. So I believe that's the reason why weapon deliveries have been slowed down over this summer. The Pentagon is trying to plan for a disaster scenario in which MAGA controls the House and Trump is elected back to the White House. I'm doing everything I can to prevent this, guys. Let's follow up on this story of the F-16 that crashed last Monday during Russia's largest air and drone attack. Zelensky dismisses the Air Force chief after the F-16 crash. Now the Defense Minister Umerov says the firing of the Air Force commander is not connected to the crash of the F-16, but I think the timing is hard to argue with. I also do want to say, for people who have not served in the military, when you're fired from a job, that's not the end of your military service. You're fired from a specific position, like commander of the group, commander of the wing, whatever. You're then reassigned, usually from a command position to a staff position. So Umerov is saying this was a scheduled reshuffling. He's going to be reassigned to a different post. But with the crash of the F-16, I don't think this is a coincidence. Ukraine reportedly probes the friendly fire as a possible cause of the F-16 crash. There's really only 3 possibilities: operator error, mechanical failure, or friendly fire. And I have been thinking about this and looking into this, and I'm actually going to say it wasn't friendly fire. Despite how complicated the skies are, the signature of a jet, even with all the different air defense units trying to shoot everything down, I think this was more likely some kind of mechanical failure of the plane. Because planes, specifically F-16s, crash all the time. It's a very common jet. There's thousands of them in the world, but January 14th, an F-16 crashed in Egypt, killing the pilot. On March 11th of last year, an F-16 crashed in Pakistan, killing the pilot. December 9th of 2022, a Wisconsin National Guard F-16 crashed in Michigan, and the pilot was killed. So these are very sophisticated and complicated machines. If a single part doesn't work, yes, the jet can fall from the sky, and it's very hard for the pilot, I guess, to eject. I don't know, but F-16 crashes seem to occur quite frequently. But Ukrainians do want an explanation, and given this is a time of war, they're not sure if they'll get the truth from their own government. Ukraine's Air Force says the United States has joined the investigation into the deadly F-16 crash. Here's journalist Ilya Ponomarenko. A proper investigation into the death of Colonel Alexei Mess with international involvement is critically necessary. So the United States, they're going to look at the flight path, the data, the air defense units in the area. I'm confident they're going to figure out if it was friendly fire or not, if it was a mechanical failure or not. I think we'll know the truth in the coming weeks when the investigation is concluded. Let's follow up on those oil depot fires. The oil depot fire in Rostov that's been going for 2 weeks officially is out, with 24 of the fuel tanks exploding and burning to the ground. Wow. The other oil depot that was on fire in Rostov, this is what the fire looked like on day 3, but we're now on, I think, day 5, and officially the fire is out. You can see that 8 of the containers were destroyed, 4 were damaged. Here's a satellite image, and you can even see the water jets from firefighting crews. So I guess the firefighting crew for this region had more resources or more expertise, but they managed to stop this before it spread to the rest of them. But there's always tomorrow night. We'll see. This is the big news from last night. Largest Ukrainian drone assault sparks fires at 2 power plants and an oil refinery in the Moscow region. Russia experienced its largest drone assault with 158 Ukrainian drones, targeting multiple regions. 158, sure. Russia, you probably shot down most of them, a majority of them. But we have plenty of evidence of drones hitting their targets. And this might be new. I think with Russia trying to blow up the dam in Kyiv, that was a red line for Ukraine. And Ukraine is now going after Russia's thermal power plants. These are the power plants that generate electricity from coal. I don't think Ukraine's going to go after any nuclear power plants. But if Russia believes in a time of war it's okay to blow up your enemy's thermal power plants like they did in Kyiv, I think Ukraine waited a couple months. I think Ukraine didn't want to actually do this because it's mostly civilians who are going to suffer. But they're doing it now. They're using drones to target thermal power plants inside of Russia. And I want to remind everyone how cold it gets in Russia in the wintertime. This was the Kharkiv power station in the Tver region. This is northwest of Moscow. The other power plant that was struck was the Kherson power plant. Both of these are in the greater Moscow region. On top of that, there's an oil refinery. I think it's like 13 kilometers from the Kremlin. And this was also struck with drones. There are videos for all of this. I'll link everything down below. We don't know how bad the damage is, but Ukraine is successfully striking power plants and oil refineries in the Moscow area. 15 kilometers where Putin lives and works. That's incredible. More bad news for Russia. Russian Mi-8 helicopter crashes in Kamchatka, killing all 22 on board, 19 passengers and 3 crew members all lost. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Ukraine's allies upbeat on ability to supply critical howitzer ammo to Kyiv. This is the Czech-led artillery initiative, and the Pentagon says they're firmly on track to deliver big volumes of 155mm ammunition to the Ukrainians. So the first shipments, I think, arrived in July, about 50,000 shells, August 50,000, but now there's going to be a huge jump. And just from the Czech-led artillery initiative, Ukraine is going to start getting 100,000 rounds every single month. Unfortunately, Ukraine is still outgunned by the Russians. The North Koreans have sent 13,000 shipping containers full of mostly artillery shells to the Russians, but I think eventually Russia's going to burn through that, and there aren't really any more rogue regimes around the world with artillery laying around that the Russians can have. Ukraine has better artillery, more accurate artillery, but Russia still relies on overwhelming numbers, and the North Koreans are willing to support them. Ukraine to get 4,000 javelins as a share of a U.S. Army contract worth $1.3 billion. They won't be coming this month, but in time, yes, Ukraine is going to get 4,000 additional javelins from this $1.3 billion contract. Ukraine to receive $800 million from the United States for its energy sector. It's a good start. World Bank to finance Ukrainian education for $415 million. Thank you so much to the World Bank. The Netherlands will deliver 28 Viking S-10 tracked vehicles to Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of the Netherlands. Belgium will allocate 150 million euros to restore civilian and energy infrastructure in Kyiv and Chernihiv. Thank you so much to the people of Belgium. Final clip I want to share with you guys is from friend of the channel, Macer Gifford. And this clip is actually from Kherson 5 months ago. I didn't notice it when he uploaded it, so I want to share it now. But this clip is of an artillery shell that hits right here. It hit this park and this public playground, and Macer wants to show you what happens when an artillery shell hits a playground.
Anyway, I'm just walking up this path, and you can see the horror of the Russian shelling. You can see this enormous shell hole right here. You can see where the local authorities or some locals have pushed these back again. Try and almost repair it. But it's kicked up those enormous paving slabs, and the shrapnel has just shredded through this park. Had children been in here, they would have been killed instantly. Just imagine your child playing with this toy in the park, fiddling around with these things, and then bang, shrapnel comes ripping through through that, whatever that is, the toy. Just imagine your child, he's just about to climb up here, and he's just about to go play on the slides, and then bang, the shrapnel comes ripping through. Isn't it horrendous? Isn't it absolutely horrifying?
All that shrapnel ripping through this playground from one round hitting the park. This has been happening to the children of Ukraine for the last 2.5 years. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.